Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be doing some maintenance and an upgrade to the adjustment bolts on my Xpress bow press. The plastic you can see on these bolts right here is stripped from the bolt itself, so when you tighten that bolt the plastic just spins, that plastic handle. I'm explaining here that basically that plate right there is two thin plates and they threaded through that. So there's actually not a whole lot of thread for that bolt to grab onto. So originally I was thinking, well, weld a nut there and then just use a bolt, a longer bolt that's threaded the whole way up, and then weld a T-handle on a bolt. But once I started getting into this project, I did not have a bolt. I keep a bolt bin in my garage, and I did not have a bolt with this. This is a 10 millimeter with 1.0 thread pitch. I did not have any, so I decided just to modify these, and I'm going to leave the thread the same. But I did notice as I was tearing this apart that little metal, I think it's stainless plate there between the bigger square tubing and the smaller square tubing, it has set screws on it. So I think what I'll do is once I get it set for my bow, I'll tighten those set screws to lock it in place. And then down here, these aluminum blocks, like pillow blocks for the saw thread, are loose. So when you put your bow in here and you start to press it, you can actually see those kind of torque or lift away from the metal or the steel frame. And you can't tighten those bolts. It's hard to see them up in there, right there. You cannot tighten those bolts without taking the all thread out because it's blocking that Allen head. So since I'm going to be doing maintenance on this anyway, I'm going to take this all apart so I can get to those bolts and tighten everything up. Here I'm just disassembling. There is a cotter key and a pin that holds these arms on. First I'm taking off the rubber hose. I'm going to take that cotter pin out. And that pin right there. Oh, actually, sorry, I already have the cotter pins out. You can see them on the table there. And then slide that out. Slide the other pin. Pull that arm out. I'm guessing this used to be at a bow shop because those pins actually have some wear in them. Must have been used a lot. I bought this used off a guy about a year ago. Taking off some of the paint. There's some old markings, probably just presets for somebody else's bow. That tin can is actually acetone. I use it just because of that nozzles. Makes it easy to dispense it. I don't need these markings, so I'm just taking them off. Next, I'm going to take off these X arms, just pull the cotter pin, they slide right off. I'm going to mark them, make sure I know what hole they were in. These were already marked, but I take that white paint off and then just use this silver Sharpie. Those rubber bands are used to hold the bow on. Kind of holds it in place until you have the press tight. I'm going to write on here like top right, or just the orientation of these X arms so that I know which side goes where and which end is up. Decided to use black here. Now I'm going to be disassembling these arms. Like I said, these bolts are stripped, so I had to use pliers to keep them tight. So I'm just using pliers to take them out. You have to take off that little black button on the end. It's a Phillips. Trying to find my Phillips in the toolbox here. That's just a little toolbox I keep in my laundry room for miscellaneous things. That one's too small. Grab a larger one. Basically take these two rubber grommets off. Then as I go to disassemble this, I realize that I probably need to mark orientation. Well, I guess I don't need to, but I wanted to mark orientation so I know which side was which. So I'm going to do that now. In this case, it's the left side. And right side. That just slides right off. That stainless plate falls out. Wiping up. You can see those two set screws I talked about earlier. I think what my plan will be to use those to actually hold those and hold that whole thing in place once I get it set up for my bow. That way they can't slide, because the issue I was having before is I couldn't get those plastic bolts tight enough for these not to slide. So like I would start to press the bow and these would slide up the arms. I did try sanding these. I took these off a while back, tried sanding them to give them more friction, but that didn't help. So I think those set screws are going to be the answer. Just thread those in a little bit so they protrude from that stainless plate and kind of give it something to bite. You can see those bolts are pretty chewed up from having to use pliers for the last year. I'm explaining here that I was thinking that there wasn't enough threads on that bolt to be able to thread in tight enough to push that metal plate, that stainless plate, in against the smaller tube so that it would like tighten. But I later learned that that's not true. They actually thread in far enough, because I end up using these bolts because I don't have them in my garage. And I'm explaining here that I'm pretty sure that you're supposed to have 1.5 times the diameter of the bolt with thread engagement for full strength of the bolt. In this case, those two thin plates that make up that square tubing aren't even as thick as that bolt is in diameter, so there's not very many threads there. But originally I was going to weld a nut on here to give it more thread, but like I said, I think I'm going to use those Allens on that stainless plate to kind of bite against this arm instead of welding a nut on here, because I'm going to reuse these bolts. Alright, so now I'm in the garage and I'm going to continue further disassembly. I'm just measuring to try to center these threaded brass things, because that's what sets the distance for the bow press arms. They weren't centered to the all thread, which I thought was kind of odd. I think this thing's been apart before. I can kind of tell by some of the bolts and things. So I'm just taking reference measurements, making sure those brass are in the same location. And what I end up finding out is that basically that left brass piece has to be a little bit closer to center than the other one. And then once you mount this all together as a unit, it will be centered to that vertical part of the press, the shore lock part of the bow press. I'll explain that once we get back to the assembly portion. here I have to make a new bolt. There was one of the bolts that was in there was really short. It was only grabbing like 1 or 2 threads, so I had a bolt, the socket head bolt, that was the same diameter and same thread pitch. It was just a little bit too long, so I'm just basically grinding it down and then cleaning up the end where the threads start. Here I'm using a steel roll to check, basically check alignment of that aluminum block to the arm that holds the bow, because if that is twisted at all, it would probably bind on that all thread. It needs to run true to that all thread. So I was using that steel roll to make sure those were aligned before I tighten these bolts. Sorry that the GoPro is missing some of this. I evidently didn't have it angled down far enough on my head. Sorry about that. Right here, I'm cleaning up a burr that's on the underside of that aluminum block. It's just a tiny burr. Just get rid of the high spot with a flapper wheel. Okay, got it all back together. Everything's tight, including those bolts up underneath there. Actually, I don't know if somebody had it apart before or not. I had lines where, my bow sat, and now when I put it back together, I made sure these are centered on the center of the press, So I measured from here to here and here to here, and then from the all thread out to the pillow block and so forth. And then from, here to the end, here to the end. So these are centered on the fixture, centered to this, and they weren't before. So evidently maybe somebody had it apart. But because once you have these off, you can thread that brass piece independent of each other and adjust where one side is in respect to the other. But now they're both centered in the press, which is probably a better thing. But what I'm working on now is use the heat gun to heat this handle up, because these were stripped out. And the reason it's stripped out is because you can see there's like a little X molded into that went into the X on this, and that X broke off, as you can see. So these were just spinning freely. So I thought I would have a bolt to fit this. It's a 10 millimeter 1.0 pitch thread. I don't have a bolt. So I'm going to put this in my drill. I'll clean up the wrench marks and weld a T onto this end here. And originally I thought these bottomed out, but I did a test and threaded this in. I could do it with this one. Bear with me. And it actually sticks out. You can see it coming out. Sticks out that far before the threads bottom out. So I think it's okay. So I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna clean this up. I gotta get this plastic off of this one. This one's a little more, it's on there tighter. I don't know if I think this one's stripped too, but not as bad as that one. But weld a T-handle onto those, and that way this plastic can't spin. You can get them hand tight.
Yeah, this one's stripped too. See it spinning. The bolt doesn't spin. Get the plastic hot, it softens up, and it's easier to get off of this bolt because I can't pry it off right now. Basically, I'm heating it up till I see the plastic on the inside start to kind of bubble or deform. There we go. Found this in my scrap bin. I think it's a piece of stainless. Not a foolproof method, but it's not magnetic, so probably stainless. I think I will cut this, I don't know, 2.5 inches long, you know, to make it a T, and then I'll weld it on.
I am not a professional or certified welder, but this will work in my case. I'm going to put copper anti-seize on the threads and thread it back into this upright.
This is the finished product. A lot easier than the old plastic knobs. And I feel like I can feel better how tight it is so that I don't over tighten it. So that's it. This one's tight. You can see that I still have about another thread left to tighten it in even more, but it won't go in anymore. Thanks for watching. Feel free to reach out with any questions.